Today, we're kicking off our historical boot series with none other than the Oakstreet Marine Field Shoe. Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Dale of Dale's Leatherworks, and in today's video, I am very excited to be kicking off the first iteration of my historical series. I've decided to take my channel and in the immediate future, start focusing on more historical pieces of footwear, what we know about them. In addition to that, I plan to actually start buying some old World War II, World War I boots and other memorabilia and militaria to feature on my channel. So stay tuned for that. I actually have my first shipment arriving today. But in light of that, I want to talk about these Oakstreet boots. So I bought these a while ago. They were actually 30% off. I got a really good deal on them and I haven't worn them yet. So this is going to be the Oakstreet Marine Field Shoe. Let's unbox them. Let's get a good look at them. So they come with this beautiful Oakstreet Bootmakers flannel boot bag. Love that. Very soft and velvety. Each boot comes in its own boot bag, 2 for the price of 1. So the Marine Field Shoe first came onto my radar actually during my talk with Phil Callis of Ashland Leather, who also hosts the Full Grain podcast with Nick Horween, which is probably one of my favorite podcasts on leather knowledge. I learn almost everything I know about leather from Phil. In fact, he was kind enough to have me on his podcast just recently, and so I will leave a link to that podcast in the description below. If you're not subscribed to the Full Grain podcast, you are missing out, because Phil and Nick, they're a wealth of leather knowledge, and Phil asks really good, deep, insightful questions about the processes involved in tanning Horween leather, and he really provides a lot of good illumination into the thought process and what it's like at the tannery and how they achieve some of the best leather in the world, in my opinion. During that talk with Phil, he brought up to me about the concept of the Marine Field Shoe from World War II. The way he described it was the troops in the desert had a hard time with their standard smooth out service boots because the rough out was on the inside. What would happen as they're walking through the sand would get down in there, inside the boot, and would become ingrained in the rough out because the rough out is not a smooth, consistent finish. Create blisters and all kinds of horrible side effects. And I can tell you that as having worn uncomfortable shoes myself, like, your foot health, especially in the field, is extremely important. You can't survive if you have bad fitting boots and or bad performing boots for that matter. They got to stay dry, and they can't be giving you blisters or abrasions along your ankle or anything like that. You have to be comfortable in your boots, period. That brings us to the Marine Field shoe. So essentially the idea behind this model was to turn the rough out, put it on the outside. That would serve a couple functional purposes. So the inside is going to be smooth, so that way at the end of the day when you take your boots off, you just dump the sand out. It doesn't become ingrained in the smooth side of the leather. Secondly, the rough out looks good when you rough it up. The other advantage to the rough out boots was that you did not have to polish them. However, it was recommended at times to use a treatment called dubbing, which was believed to be able to waterproof the boots. Now, some soldiers complained that when they used the dubbing that it would not allow the boots to breathe as well. However, the advantages to dubbing were that they would create a waterproofing effect for the boots, and it was also thought to protect against gas attacks, though I'm not sure how true this is. It's likely that they used a petroleum jelly in the dubbing, which would have likely been flammable, but information on this is difficult to find. You don't have to worry about polishing it or making it look presentable. It's just always going to sort of, despite how much you beat it up and beat it against rocks and scrape it against dirt, it's still going to retain that essential appearance. They can just waterproof it down better by applying some oils and waxes to it. Overall, is just far more of a practical application if you're in the desert. Think about the iconic Clark's desert boot, right? It's like a low-cut chukka, and similar to this, plain toe, sort of a sandy rough-out color that matches to the sand of the desert. Super practical for that application. These boots came with this insert from Horween. Your Oakstreet Bootmakers shoes or boots have been handcrafted with the utmost care using renowned Horween leather. Horween leather undergoes 89 separate processes, taking 28 days and utilizing all 5 floors of the Horween facility in Chicago. Over the past 100 years, very little has changed in the formula. Food-grade beef tallow, cosmetic-grade beeswax, marine oil, chrome salts, tree bark extracts, and naturally occurring pigments are combined. The mixture is then applied using heat, steam pressure, the hands of craftsmen, and time. This ultimately yields the soft, supple, and durable leather that is used for your shoes or boots. Amazing. Viberg also sells the N1 Boot Marine Field shoe in natural CHROMEXCEL roughout. I'll leave a link to these boots on the Oakstreet Bootmakers website, as well as to the Viberg Field shoes in the description below, so check those out if you are so interested. It looks like the Vibergs are currently fully stocked in all sizes, and the Oakstreets are also fully stocked in most sizes. They're missing a few, but they often restock them, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. If they don't have your size, just keep an eye on their website, and you should hopefully land them soon. So this is according to Viberg. Our N1 boot was first introduced as a Japan exclusive model. We referenced various World War II models of this boot from our vintage archive to develop a more accurate version to the original, while making it authentically Viberg with our signature double row stitch down construction. These boots are not stitched down construction. These are a 270-degree Goodyear welt. The Vibergs have a Dr. Sole raw cord sole, number 2 Chantal brown eyelets, unlined upper as it's supposed to be. Theirs features a natural CHROMEXCEL tongue. So do the Oakstreets. The Viberg Field shoe is on the 2040 last, which references a vintage 1940s work boot. There's another maker that I have never reviewed or owned yet, the Real McCoys. They have their own Marine Field shoe, and they give a really good history. Link to the Real McCoys also in the description. During World War II, the U.S. Navy developed a new and improved line of special and protective clothing, issued in 3 N systems: the N1, the N2, and the N3. The N1 was designed for cold weather environments. It consisted of 21 items. Alongside the N1 deck jacket, the field shoes, N1, became later known as boondockers, are some of the most revered. The boondocker name itself originated from World War II military slang used to describe a wild, heavily wooded area, derived from the Tagalog word bundock. Based on the field shoes worn by the Marine Corps, the N1 shoe was constructed using a blucher pattern, flesh-out cowhide, a full reclaimed rubber sole and heel. To conserve materials, the soles and heels were infused with fiber cording, thereby extending the supply of rubber and creating a distinctive speckled pattern. This model is distinguished by a custom-produced pulverized hemp cord added sole and steer hide upper for improved durability. The cotton laces are also custom made and lightly oil coated as seen on the vintage pair from our archive. Manufacturers marked the bottom of the sole with a conservation and/or corded label to indicate the use of reclaimed rubber and cording. The raw cord graphics on this boot were hand painted in our Kobe headquarters before being cast into a mold. Black Bear brand also sells a version of this boot inspired by this boot called the Rough Rider in Horween Marine Field ROUGHOUT. In 1940, so this is according to Black Bear brand, also link in description. In 1940, the U.S. government asked the Horween Tannery to develop a leather for the Marine Field shoe. The Horween Tannery experimented and worked on the manufacturing of this special leather and submitted it to the Quartermaster Department of the U.S. Marine Corps in 1942. Out of all the special leathers submitted, the Horween Marine Field leather was selected as the exclusive leather for the Marine Field boot. Towards the end of 1942, the Army found its service shoe upper leathers unsatisfactory and also adopted the Marine Field boot and used it under the name Flesh Out Retan Leather. Very cool. I love how all these sites just have a little bit of a different glimpse into the history. This is according to WWIUniforms.com. The field shoe was introduced in 1941 to provide Marines with a more durable shoe for use in the field. During the interwar years, the polished cordovan leather-soled shoe was utilized for both field and garrison duty, designed primarily for style and comfort. The cordovan shoe featured a full lining, leather outsoles, a highly polished exterior composite with toe cap and brogue holes, features that weren't necessarily ideal for rough terrain. The new field shoe reintroduced rough-out uppers, a feature which hadn't been used on a general issue shoe since World War I, and full rubber outsoles and heels. These two principal features enabled the shoe to better resist moisture and increase its wear in the field. Vast improvements over the cordovan shoe. Later, the Army and Navy would adopt field shoes with similar characteristics. For enlisted men, these shoes were worn with various field uniforms. They were also occasionally worn with the winter and summer service uniforms, especially overseas during the latter part of the war. Centralized procurement accomplished through the Quartermaster General of the Marine Corps in Washington, D.C. World War II contracts dates range from approximately 10 June 1941 through May 1945. In the post-war years, the field shoe was contracted intermittently into 1948. The common manufacturers of these field shoes were International Shoe Co. and Joseph M. Herman Shoe Company. The distinctive features of these field shoes were the U.S. Marine Corps inspector punch marks on the insole, corded outsoles and heels, and 2 rows of stitching on the bottom of the outsole. The materials utilized were natural cowhide, chrome retan, flesh side out, insoles, slip tap, full leather, outsoles were full leather, and they had 37 to 40 inch laces strung through 7 to 10 pairs of eyelets depending on the shoe size. There were some types and variants. Some shoes appear to have been constructed with leather pre-treated with waterproofing compound or a similar product. These shoes are typically darker in color than others. The specification was revised in 1943. It is currently unknown what changes were made during this revision. By 1944, the shoes had been renamed Garrison shoes. This was the pre-war polished cordovan high-top model for the enlisted man. It was superseded in 1951 by the new rough-out boot, which became standard issue that was constructed with heavily pre-treated leather. This was also a companion high-top shoe similar to the field shoe, which was less common. So the U.S. Navy's equivalent was the N1, and the U.S. Army equivalent was the service shoes reverse upper composition sole. Enlisted men were afforded the allowance to purchase 1 pair of field shoes and 1 pair of garrison shoes, or 1 pair of field shoes and 1 pair of low quarter shoes. These shoes were used by the U.S. Marine Corps in all major island campaigns during the Pacific War, including the Solomons, Gilberts, Palau, Marshalls, Marianas, and Ryukyus. Some field shoes were dyed black in the late 1950s to the early 1960s. Most of the characteristics and features of the Marine field shoe were also present in the U.S. Navy N1 field shoe. Very cool. And this is according to WorldWar2Gear.com. They sell a reproduction as well. So they say that the Marine field shoe were often worn with gaiters to keep out debris, full grain suede leather uppers, comfortable leather footbed, sure grip rubber outsoles, repairable Goodyear welt, 7 eyelet lacing system, and brown cotton lace. Approximately 7 inches tall, and the pair weighs just over 3 pounds. Alright, so that's a lot of information. Let's bring it back to Oakstreet now. So Oakstreet says that their field boot is hand-lasted 270-degree Goodyear welt construction made with Horween CHROMEXCEL roughout leather, partially structured toe, brown Vibram 700 cork sole and heel with hand-tapped brass tacks, barber welt with hand-brushed edge stain, calfskin vamp lining, tone-on-tone stitching, brown enamel brass eyelets, waxed cotton laces. They're built on the Elston last, developed to embody the character of Chicago. The Elston last is engineered specifically for our line of everyday boots, providing exceptional all-day comfort for nearly all foot types with a generous toe box. The Vibram 700 cork outsole is non-marking, oil-resistant workhorse sole infused with nitrile cork and stabilized with a steel shank for durability and comfort without compromise. Each sole is paired with a matching Vibram 700 heel. And of course, for the 18th time during this review, I will mention the uppers are Horween CHROMEXCEL roughout. Horween's roughout is a version of its famous CHROMEXCEL with the roughout side out, similar to a rugged suede in texture, but with a firmer hand and color that deepens and develops a beautiful patina with wear. This is a faithful rendition of the specification with details finished by hand. The only N1 boot hand-lasted in the United States. They give a little bit more of the history. So the Horween Marine Field shoe, they say whoever authored specification 72S-2 was being either polite or simply compliant with contractor protocol when he listed chrome tanned, flesh side out, natural cowhide, chromium sulfate tanning process to increase leather's resistance to water. A specific tannage had already been requested by the Navy, same used for the Marine Field shoe, which served as a de facto prototype of the N1. The Marines worked with none other than Chicago's own Horween Leather Company to develop a variant of the CHROMEXCEL tannage specifically for roughout. This tannage was assigned the utilitarian moniker Marine Field Shoe, which is how it appears on Horween invoices to this day. Our field shoe is available in Marine Field Shoe by the name Natural CHROMEXCEL Roughout, as well as Natural CHROMEXCEL and Black CHROMEXCEL, which were both used by the Army and Navy for later variations based on the N1. Specification 72-S-2 calls for a sole made from reclaimed rubber soles, infused with cord known as cork. Due to wartime supply shortages, N1 soles varied in quality, with some bearing the marks of reputable makers such as Goodyear, while others were cobbled together with no markings other than rudimentary tread by inexperienced but enterprising firms. Our field boot uses the best cork sole still made in the USA in the style of those used by the N1. Vibram's non-marking oil-resistant workhorse infused with nitrile cork and stabilized with a steel shank and natural cork footbed for durability and comfort without compromise. Each sole is paired with matching Vibram 700 heel. Like most N1 boots, the field boot sole is further secured with hand-tapped brass tacks. The 270-degree Goodyear welt is unspecified but ubiquitous. There are any number of reasons why nearly all N1 boots were constructed with a 270-degree Goodyear welt rather than the 360-degree. It may have been to use as little thread as possible, or simply because the sample N1 boot shown to manufacturers had such a welt, or our favorite theory, that the 270-degree welt was yet another example of the particularly strong personal preferences of one General Douglas MacArthur. We can definitely rule out one potential reason, however. The 270-degree welt was not a requirement of the specification, nor was any other particular type of welt. Nonetheless, as far as we know, every N1 that saw combat and survived the trip home features a 270-degree Goodyear welt. No matter the reason, the 270-degree Goodyear welt is ubiquitous among surviving N1 boots, and as far as we're concerned, every bit as essential to the specification as anything actually specified therein. The 270-degree welt on our field boot is home to another unspecified but far less common feature, edge stain, which helps the welt resist moisture while visually harmonizing the dark with the brown cork sole. Oakstreet also sells the U.S. Navy Field Shoe N1 in Natural CHROMEXCEL roughout. It's basically the same thing as the field boot, except by the look of it, they're using a different sole. They're using a Dr. Sole 1122 raw cord sole, which is inspired by the cork soles of the famous U.S. Navy N1 field boot used in World War II. The 1122 includes numerous improvements, including greater durability, shock absorption, and a reduction in weight. Perhaps the most notable improvement is its traction, which comes courtesy of the pulverized hemp cord embedded into the nitrile rubber compound. Each sole is affixed to a thick layer of leather and paired with a matching Dr. Sole 1102 raw cord heel. Wow, and they have pictures of the actual vintage boots used and their reproduction of it. Wow, that's incredible. So some more history. Sorry folks, this is going to be a long video, but I'm a history geek. I love it. I'm passionate about World War II, and I'm not going to stop until every detail is included in this video. I don't want to hear it. 1943, the U.S. Navy had become a far more versatile force, with shore parties, construction battalions, and amphibious unit roles that had historically been filled by Marines, Army engineers, and so forth. Thus, the need arose for more robust general-purpose footwear. With time and resources in short supply, it was decided that the field shoes, adopted by the Marine Corps in 1941, known colloquially as boondockers, should be recommissioned as the primary field shoe for Navy personnel, which was then designated under specification 72-S-2 and issued in 1943 as part of the Navy's new N1 uniform standard. The field shoe was developed to withstand amphibious assaults, featuring then new water-resistant marine field shoe leather developed by Horween. Many know this leather as natural CHROMEXCEL ROUGHOUT, but Horween's invoices say marine field shoe to this day. Rubber soles were another necessary novelty. Because rubber was in short supply, the specification called for cork soles that contained scraps of hemp cord. Since its debut, the Navy's field shoe would come to have a broad and lasting impact on the design and manufacture of boots of all sorts, including our very own field boot. To celebrate its 80th anniversary, we are reissuing the U.S. Navy Field Shoe N1, featuring Horween's marine field shoe leather, of course, with an unstructured toe just like the original. Dr. Sole's 1122 raw cord sole and matching 1102 raw cord heel are not only inspired by those of the originals, but objectively superior. The sole was finished with the same number of brass tacks and same double rapid stitch as our 1943 reference specimen. We also make sure that all the marks and packaging were period appropriate and that they were spot matched for some of the typographic standards used by the defense contractors in 1943. Of course, there is one notable difference between the original and our reissue. Rather than being stamped out by the million, each of our U.S. Navy field shoes is hand-lasted and hand-finished. So these actually include mil-spec cotton duck boot bags. Dang. Before shoving off, sailors are mustered with sea bags containing all required uniform components, and the list is long, including 2 belts, 4 types of cap, 4 undershirts in each of 2 colors, a parka, a peacoat, 5 types of trousers, a towel, and so on. The bags are made from domestically sourced cotton duck, and sailors must claim their bag with ownership markings, consisting of their surname, first, and middle initial. Today, these markings must be stenciled in. But in World War II, sailors would lay claim to their sea bag with their own hand, some taking great care to do so, while others would make their marks rather offhandedly. Each pair of our U.S. Navy field shoes includes 2 boot bags made in USA from Coyote Brown, number 10 mil-spec cotton duck, with a small screen printed form to aid in the application of ownership markings. Signs of the times. All marks on the product and packaging are not only period appropriate, but inspired by some of the more notable contractors involved in U.S. Navy field shoe production, including International Shoe Company and the Narrow Fabric Company. The latter, it must be said, had what must be the best of all possible trade names for a lace maker. Since design and typographic standards were more utilitarian concerns in the war era, what visual consistency there was in the labeling and packaging of equipment produced by third parties was usually a result of there being a handful of widely used type families, particularly those designed by Morris Fuller Benton. In the development of the U.S. Navy Field Shoes N1, we created a simple utilitarian visual system based on a few design motifs used by contractors of the original boot, including the use of Benton's Franklin Gothic and Schoolbook in charmingly inconsistent widths and weights. Leave it to Oakstreet Bootmakers to really do their research. I was expecting to find more about the marine field shoes from other sources, not from the bootmaker themselves. So that alone, to me, I appreciate so much, because they did so much dang research in building these boots that, frankly, I'm impressed. They're not only bootmakers, they're also historians. And this is also my tie-in to boots and this channel, why it exists, because I'm so fascinated with history and the wars. My draw to this stuff isn't necessarily fashion, though that is a component. It's also part of my heritage. It's part of our heritage as Americans. I'm really impressed by Oakstreet. I mean, they really nailed it with the history there. With that all out of the way, let's take a quick minute to hear from our sponsor, Dale's Leatherworks. That's me, by the way. It's just me. I'm not really sponsoring. I'm just hawking my products on this video. So I actually sell natural CHROMEXCEL kilties on my website, dalesleatherworks.com. And as you can see, this piece of natural CHROMEXCEL, this is the smooth side. When I flip it around, that's the rough out side. That's essentially what these boots are. It's just the rough out. So if you take the tongue and turn it around, you can see that it matches the smooth side. See, these are essentially just natural CHROMEXCEL. Just turn the other way. Now, this rough out side is not as pretty as these boots, because these were lasted, they were worked on, and maybe roughed up a little bit, though I don't think they did. I think they just lasted it, and it just naturally looks this way. But yeah, natural CHROMEXCEL, this is going to be a core offering on my website. You can get them in blind, you can get them in jagged, you could also get them in long. If you'd like, you can just buy them, turn them the opposite side, and then it'll match your uppers there. As far as sizing goes, this is what stopped me from buying Oakstreet originally, was their sizing information on their website was a little confusing. I think they said go true to size. Now, I'm a 9 Brannock, 8.5 is definitely my size. So my recommendation, take your half down. Size the same as you do with Red Wing, size the same as you do with Parkhurst. And this Elston last is just beautiful. Really rounded out at the toe. Whenever I see a rounded out toe, it makes me happy, because, well, that's gonna fit my foot perfectly. So yeah, we've got Oakstreet Bootmakers embossed on the heel seat on the inside. All beautiful, smooth CHROMEXCEL on the inside as well. Yeah, really like these painted brown brass tack eyelets. Beautiful. We've got 7 of them. No speed hooks. Yeah, this Vibram outsole is brown. It's got the V-bar shape, the same shape as the V-bar. So it's going to give you plenty of grip without trucking in mud and debris that a Commando outsole would. We've got a really thick vegetable tanned leather midsole. Just a beautiful, striking pair of boots. I really like this back heel stay. It's all one piece, similar to how Viberg does it. It's quadruple stitched to the vamp. Lots of good security there. They smell amazing. They have that amazing Horween CHROMEXCEL smell to them. And so this really excites me, getting to own a pair of historical boots. It means a lot to me sentimentally, so I'm gonna wear these with pride. I have not worn these yet. They've been sitting in the box for about 8 months. I've been meaning to review these, but now that I decided to launch my history series, I'm gonna start wearing them. I'm not gonna use them in the stitch down Patina Thunderdome, because, well, frankly, these aren't gonna patinate up a whole ton. They'll get darker in some areas. They'll absorb some indigo from the denim, but aside from that, even if you rough these up a bunch, you're not going to see like a super dramatic change over time. They will, you know, form to your foot and all that, and they will darken up in certain areas, but for the most part, most of the patina that you're going to see in these is not going to be on the uppers. Most of the patina is just going to be in the shape change. With a lot of wear, it's going to go from this perfect looking look to being sort of more crinkled and warped in certain areas, similar to how we see on the stitched down Patina Thunderdome before and after pictures. That's what tends to happen. And by warped, I mean these are my custom craft boots in russet harness, all German made, incredible. But as you can see, the shape of the boot is what mainly changed. It's not the color, though it has lightened up in some areas. It's definitely changed, not so much in the color. It's more in the shape. It's more in the creasing, and this leather outsole allowed for even more warping to take place. I think of leather like wood, right? Wood warps. It's previously a living material, and for that reason, it just gets better with age, gets better with wear, gets better with love. And yeah, so I'll be doing a separate video on these, on my thoughts on the third stitched down Patina Thunderdome. What's coming up? Well, I've been browsing a lot of militaria websites that sell old war era relics. You could just buy this stuff. These are museum pieces. It's really fascinating that you could just go order a used pair of officer's boots. You could even order Nazi garments. Crazy. So I do plan to get a lot of that stuff. So I also, during the Standard and Strange inflation sale, I picked up a couple pair of Eastman, including the Eastman Raider boots that more or less officially kicked off this series, though I didn't plan on doing a historical series at the time. But the Eastman Raider boots that I reviewed, I'll also leave a link to that video in the description below. Fascinating trip through history on those. I also got the Eastman Tanker boots. So those just arrived. The Tankers, still waiting on the Raiders in walnut horsehide, but those are coming up. So stay tuned. Remember, subscribe if you're not, because this channel is about to take on a really fun new direction. So anyways, with that, I'm gonna shut it down. Leave me your thoughts in the comments below. I'm Dale of Dale's Leatherworks. End of transmission.